Chapter 4: The Loy Factor Story. When President Kennedy was struck down on that historic Friday in 1963, I was a 10th grader making a bookshelf in woodshop class. Like millions of others, I will never forget the impact of that day, of that week, while I watched in black and white the sad, ceremonious end of the young presidency. Although I came to question the official explanation of how this crime occurred, I certainly didn't consider myself an assassination buff. Never in my wildest dreams did it occur to me that I would someday be drawn into an investigation of this decades-old crime. Yet, by a series of random events, I would be. My life crossing Mark Collum's life was one of those random events. I had not seen Mark in over 4 years, but in the winter of 1975, he and his lovely new wife, Christy, showed up at our home in Northern California. It was to be the rekindling of an old and lasting friendship that began when we were in high school together in 1965. During our visit, Mark filled me in on the missing years of his life, his arrest and imprisonment, but most important, he described his brief friendship with Loy Factor while in McAllister Prison, a story that was to become the seed of this book. I listened with great interest as he repeated the chilling account related to him by Loy Factor back in the summer of 1971. Prior to meeting Mark, Loy had confessed his involvement to no one but his wife, Juanita. Perhaps Loy's motive in telling Mark was simply this need to purge his soul from guilt, but whatever his reason, Loy's remarkable and detailed description of the assassination and its surrounding events convinced Mark that he was telling the truth. I could tell that my friend had been totally convinced. It was then that I recalled something I had once read in the book Rush to Judgment, an early criticism of the Warren Commission's report by author Mark Lane. Up to that point, it was the only book I had ever read concerning the assassination of President Kennedy. I found the reference and showed it to Mark. In Chapter 5, Lane tells of young Arnold Rowland, who minutes before the shooting saw 2 men on the 6th floor, and one of them was holding a rifle. "That makes sense, doesn't it?" Mark exclaimed. It was probably Loy or the man who hired him that this guy saw.
Arnold Rowland was here with his wife on Houston Street in the crowd waiting for the motorcade. But he told the commission, and a few days ago repeated his story for us here, of seeing a gunman lurking in another window entirely.
I just looking around and we noticed a man up in the window, and I remarked to my wife, tried to point him out, and remarked that he must be a security guard, Secret Service agent.
Well, the window then that you're referring to is on the opposite end of the building from where the main entrance to the building is.
Yes, it is on the other side of the building. And he had a rifle. It looked like a high-powered rifle because it had a scope which looked in relation to the size of the rifle to be a big scope.
I suggested that we call Dick Stewart, a friend who was an attorney, and later that evening, Mark related the whole story to him. Dick was fascinated with it and suggested that we tape record it, which we did the next day. Then we discussed our options for dealing with the information. Should we contact the FBI, the Secret Service, or the CIA? How about contacting Edward Kennedy? The decision was finally made to send the tape to a friend of Stewart's who was an investigative reporter in Los Angeles. Our reasoning was that the news media was responsible for blowing the lid off the recent Watergate scandal, not the government. Perhaps in the hands of the media, we hoped the same results would occur. Well, months went by without a word from the reporter. We finally assumed that he had run into a dead end or had dropped the investigation. We couldn't help but wonder if Loy was still alive. Had the reporter found him and determined that there was no validity to the story? Well, we never found the answer. The Loy factor story was never forgotten, however. In 1992, the movie JFK had America talking about the Kennedy assassination again. Magazines, newspapers, and television programs dealt with the controversy in one form or another. In a Life magazine article on the assassination, Mark noticed a picture of Larry Howard, a consultant for the movie JFK and the director of the JFK Assassination Information Center in downtown Dallas. Mark called Dallas and got in touch with Larry, explaining that he had information about the assassination that he felt could be useful. While Mark told him the story, Larry listened carefully, jotting down notes, names, and dates. He was impressed with the information and promised to investigate. Mark immediately called me from his home in the Midwest. We were both excited. Finally, after 17 years, a knowledgeable investigator was going to look into the Loy factor story. Within a couple of weeks, Larry called Mark back. He had driven north to Tishomingo, Oklahoma, and talked with Mr. John Small, the reporter, columnist with the Johnson County Capital Democrat, a local weekly newspaper. John searched the paper's archives for any information about Loy, the murder of his wife, and the subsequent trial. Larry also went into the county courthouse to obtain information, and although he was unable to determine whether Loy Factor was still alive, he was able to verify details of the manhunt and the murder trial. Larry was determined to look into the case further. Meanwhile, Mark and I had been trying to locate the tape made back in 1975 for Dick Stewart. We discovered that Dick had passed away, and with him, hope of ever finding the tape or the reporter he had sent it to. Later, as events unfolded, Mark and I flew to Dallas to meet with Larry Howard at the JFK Assassination Information Center. We then drove to nearby Tishomingo, Oklahoma, in an effort to locate Loy Factor. The trip to Tishomingo proved most interesting. We met with John Small and the staff of the Capital Democrat and checked out several old newspaper articles concerning Factor's arrest and trial. One of the clippings highlighted the fact that Loy was a skilled woodsman and hunter. Other articles verified many of the things Mark had been told by Factor while in the hospital, such as the night that someone shot at him, wounding him in the arm while still in Johnson County Jail. We also verified, just as Loy had said, that he was captured after the largest manhunt in southern Oklahoma history. Several other articles recounted the trial, verifying Loy's testimony that pointed to his stepdaughter Deborah as the murderer. A humorous note to the trial was the county sheriff's interruption of the proceedings to ask for the key to the jail. It was in Loy Factor's shirt pocket. Since Johnson County did not have the funds to hire a jailer, Factor, a well-behaved prisoner, was given trustee status, complete with the jailhouse key. Mark's faith in Loy's truthfulness grew. The public record was substantiating everything that he had been told, including the events that seemed far-fetched, such as Loy's possession of the jailhouse key. Then, finally, we located Factor's sister-in-law, who pointed us to where Loy was living. We were also given his landlord's phone number, and a call that evening verified our hopes. Loy Factor was still alive. The distance was too far to drive on our short schedule, so we made plans to fly there as soon as possible. It was decided that Mark and Larry Howard would go together to talk to Loy, equipped with a tiny tape recorder. We all wondered what his reaction would be. Would he deny the story? Would he even talk to them? It was during this period that the idea of writing them in on the 6th floor was born. We decided that if Loy cooperated and admitted his participation in the assassination, we would urge him to break his silence of 30 years at that time and come forward to tell the world what he knew. We felt the anxiety of standing at the proverbial crossroads. Time seemed to stand still while arrangements were made to contact Loy.